In WPF, all controls are lookless. They have no built-in inherent look. Their actual appearance is controlled by templates, and every control has a default template. But you can modify those templates. Here we've drawn a button on the canvas in Blend. We'll right-click and come down to Edit Template, and our choice is to edit a copy of the existing template or to create an entirely new template, which will let us create an entirely new look for this button. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll call it Round Button Template, and that will put us into the template editor. All we're given as a starting point for the template is a grid. We want our button to be round, so let's go ahead and put an ellipse right into that grid in our template. As soon as we let go, the property window reflects our ellipse. We can set its width and height more precisely. We'll set it to 75 so that it's a circle. We can then come up and set its fill. Let's do that with a linear gradient brush. We'll pick a nice blue color for our linear gradient brush to make our button look a little bit nicer. Then to have some text on our button, we'll click on text block and we will draw the text block right over the button. You can see in the object timeline that the text block shows as under the ellipse. We can even name the text block right here, or we could do so in the properties window, or we could do so, of course, in the XAML. You see the name is reflected in the properties window. We can go to the properties window and bump the font up to 14 point. We're going to want to change the foreground brush, which is currently black and not showing up so well on our blue background. So let's go down to the hexadecimal value and change that to all Fs, which will be white. And now we have white text on our bluish background. Let's go over to the text and change it from text block to OK. Come down to the layout section and remove the left margin and the top margin. The right and bottom are already 0, and let's also center that. We can also use the pointer to physically move the text block with respect to the circle. We now have a respectable looking button. It is inert, and we want to respond to the typical mouse over and so forth, so we're going to come over to the states window and say that this is the normal state. Then we'll go over to the mouse over state, and it's recording whatever changes we make. So we'll click on the circle, on the ellipse. We'll come down to the transforms window, and here we can make any number of transformations. We're going to do a scale transform to scale it up on the x-axis to 1.5 its normal size, and the same on the y-axis, making the button in total 1.5 times its normal size on mouse over. We can stop recording. We want to set the transition time so that it doesn't just jump to that size. So we're going to choose star to mouse over, that is from any other state to mouse over, and we'll set that to 0.4 seconds. I inadvertently added a transition to the disabled state. What I want is a transition to any state, mouse to star. And so let's set that to 0.4 seconds and delete the transition to the disabled state. We can now run the project, and what we should see is when we have mouse over the button, it swells, and when we remove it, it shrinks, and those are gradual over the course of 0.4 of a second. Let's set the pressed state. When it's pressed, we want to rotate it 45 degrees. No point in rotating the circle, but we can rotate the text. So let's go to a rotate transform and set the angle to 45 degrees. And then we can reposition the text to stay centered, stop recording, and let's set the transitions on the pressed state from any other state to pressed. We will give it 0.3 seconds, and from pressed to any other state, we will give it 0.3 seconds. We can now run the project, and we should see that when it's pressed, it twists, and sure enough, when we click, it twists. When we let go, it twists back. So you can see that there's a great deal of control that you can take over the design and workings of your control using templating. Let's grab the button and move it down to the left and draw a second button onto the canvas. There are a number of ways of adding the resource we just created to that button. One is to right click on it and come down to Edit Template, and here you have the option to apply resource, and the resource it's offering is the round button template that we just created, and now we have two buttons that look and behave the same based on the template we just created. So we should see that they each swell when you hover over them, and when you click them they twist. We can take a look at the XAML that supports this. Most of the work is being done in a Windows resource, which is the control template. The key is round button template, which is what we named it. There's all of the storyboard work for switching among the various states, and then at the bottom is our grid with two buttons. And notice that each of the buttons has a property template that is set to dynamic resource for our round button template. We can save this project and open it in Visual Studio. We open it in Visual Studio by going to Open Project, navigating to the same project we were just working on, open the solution. There's all that XAML, but we can go over to the design side, see the two buttons that we have in fact in place in the grid. We can come back to the XAML to work with those buttons. And to make this somewhat less confusing, let's collapse the Windows resources. There's our grid with the two buttons. That is just normal XAML with a normal grid. We can put a stack panel in there. We can add a text block and give that text block some text. And with that in place, we can run the application from within Visual Studio, see the prompt and the button continues to work as intended. So you can see very quickly that templates give you a great deal of control over the look and feel of your application.